Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Another day, another nauseating puff piece vomited out by the royal family's lapdog, People magazine. This time, it's a laughable yarn about Harry, oh so graciously offering his schedule to avoid clashing with the royal schedule. 5 years of Harry and Meghan gleefully stomping all over royal engagements with their attention-grabbing stunts, and now we're supposed to believe and buy this noble peace offering? Come on, give me a break. This reeks of two things. First, in my opinion, it's a blatant admission that Harry and Meghan spent half a decade, yes, half a decade is 5 years, deliberately trying to upstage the monarchy like the petulant fame chasers they are. Second, their grand plan to become America's darling globalist power couple has crashed and burned spectacularly. With Trump back in the White House, their Hollywood dreams are fizzling faster than a cheap sparkler. Suddenly, Harry's nowhere to be found, and carefully curated stories are dripping out to pave his way back into the royal fold. Anyone think that's a coincidence? Also, have you noticed that the Meghan circus has suddenly died down? I'm not complaining, but no more headlines, no more carefully crafted stage pap shoots or PR stunts designed to gaslight the public. Just pretty much silence and a slow retreat. And let's not forget the ultimate middle finger, which are those two conveniently invisible children in the line of succession. Now, if you haven't figured it out yet, we've all been played, lied to, and jerked around by the crown. And they're banking on us swallowing this reconciliation nonsense whole. Sad part is that people are indeed lapping it up from the people who have been deliberately controlled and assigned to push it out. A tale as old as time in the world of PR, this has been a game where the voices shouting the truth get suppressed, while the anointed clickbait peddlers and their perfectly timed exclusives are blasted through every channel without restrictions. If you've been paying attention, you've seen it with your own eyes, haven't you? Don't let this kind of media gaslight you into doubting what you know. Just because their glossy headlines skip over it or direct your attention away by salacious gossip doesn't mean it's not real or happening. Just because some information is not coming from part of the aristocracy or Hollywood's inner circle is not credible. The information I'm giving you are my educated takes built on facts that have the shadow lurkers right now watching my channel sweating bullets because their dirty laundry is now getting aired. I've always told you to draw your own conclusions, but take back your common sense. That's all I'm asking you to do. Today, I'm dragging an old topic back into light, one that a few brave creators touched on before getting drowned out by the flood of distraction nonsense being pumped out now. Let's go ahead and revisit talking about the Counselor of State and the role of regents, because apparently we need a reminder when the media is working overtime to keep you looking the other way. Before we dive in, help the kid out and do me a huge favor by hitting that like button, then double check you're subscribed, because this channel, as we all know, has been marked and suppressed. If you are subscribed, there's a better chance you will see when new videos are posted. The powers that be are cranking up the censorship, and thanks to Harry and Meghan's targeting certain accounts, I'm barely a blip on the algorithm's radar. They don't want you to see any of this, so make sure you're locked in. All right, let's get into it. All right, so first let's dive into Counselor of State. What is it and why it's deliberately deceptive in the way it's explained on the royal family's website? So first, getting to the basics, a counselor of state is supposed to be someone who can temporarily act on behalf of the monarch if the king is abroad or ill. It sounds important, right? But here's the kicker. It's a role that is mostly ceremonial and rarely invoked. Now, the law says these stand-ins must be over 21, in the line of succession, and a key point here, domiciled in the UK. Notice that last part. Prince Harry fails that test miserably. He lives in Montecito, California. He allegedly pays U.S. taxes, and he hasn't pledged his loyalty to King Charles. So, by the letter of this law, Prince Harry does not qualify, and yet he's still on the list. Why? Well, King Charles had the perfect opportunity in 2022 when Parliament passed the Councillors of State Act. That was when Anne and Edward were added, effectively pushing Harry and Andrew to the sidelines. Charles could have removed them both outright. It would have been clean, defensible, and legally sound. But he didn't. Instead, he left them on the list, functionally powerless but still there. And what we see here is this little line that says, in practice, only working members of the royal family are called upon to act as counselor of state. So let's call this what this is. A legit PR maneuver, not a constitutional one. The palace wanted to look like it was preserving stability while avoiding the nasty optics of Charles publicly stripping his own son of a constitutional role. They avoided the headlines, King disowns Harry. They dodged the family feud, spilling even more ink into the press. But in doing so, they compromised constitutional integrity. The law's the law. If you're not domiciled in the UK, you don't qualify. And here's the problem with this. When you bend the rules for optics, you open the door for suspicion. Because if Harry isn't legally qualified to be a counselor of state, yet he's still on the books, how do we really know what's happening behind closed doors? We're told he has no official role, but he remains a heartbeat away from stepping in for the king on paper. We're told Andrew is retired, yet he still enjoys perks, protection, and quiet privileges. The palace is selective in what they tell us, showing the public a carefully edited highlight reel while keeping the full story locked in a vault. We all know we haven't been told the truth. And that raises a far more troubling question. Is Prince Harry really sidelined, or is he quietly being used as a tool of soft diplomacy abroad? I mean, I think that's a reasonable question to ask after all we have witnessed, right? Think about it. Harry's activities in the U.S. tick every box of the Agenda 2030 playbook. Through Archwell, we know he pushes mental health initiatives, digital safety campaigns, racial justice projects, and the fight against so-called misinformation. On paper, these sound so noble, but dig deeper and you find the same World Economic Forum and UN talking points reshaping online spaces, censoring dissent, promoting algorithmic control, all under the banner of protecting people, now moved towards protecting children online. And let's be blunt, in the United States, this directly collides with the Constitution. Free speech doesn't come with a misinformation clause. Yet here's Harry, an unelected foreign royal, still technically tied to the UK crown, advocating for policy shifts that restrict the very freedoms Americans are guaranteed. Now, combine that with King Charles's own ambitions. Charles is not shy about his globalist vision. He's a leading voice in the World Economic Forum, climate policies, a promoter of the Great Reset, and the architect of, again, as I've mentioned before, the Sustainable Markets Initiative dealing with the planet. He's pushing financial and environmental governance reforms straight from the World Economic UN playbook. This is like right out there in the open. This is not conspiracy. All that information you can find yourself online. So ask yourself, is Harry's presence in the U.S. really just a coincidence? Or is it a strategic move keeping him, quote unquote, officially inactive while he unofficially softens American resistance to the same agenda Charles is championing abroad? This is how soft power works, my friends. Not with armies, but with influence. Not with treaties, but with celebrity platforms and NGO partnerships. Harry doesn't need diplomatic immunity or a U.S. visa exemption to be useful. His royal title, his global brand, and the attempts at carefully curating his PR image make him the perfect envoy with ever calling him one. We've seen how PR pushes out these so-called glossy PR stunts to make him look like he is making a difference and impact on the world. And the sad part about it is that there's still a vast majority of people who don't pay attention to what's going on believing it. And because Charles didn't remove him from the Counselors of State list, the Crown gets to keep its plausible deniability. Harry? Oh, he has no power, no role. Meanwhile, his advocacy aligns perfectly with the very policies the monarchy publicly supports through the UN and World Economic Forum. So let's recap what we've uncovered here. Harry doesn't legally qualify to be a counselor of state. Charles kept him on the list anyway, for optics. That's all it is optics, not law. The palace's selective transparency fuels suspicion about what Harry is really doing abroad. Through Archwell, he's promoting World Economic Forum UN Agenda 2030 talking points, especially censorship, under the guise of safety. And all of this conveniently advances the same globalist agenda Charles is pushing while shielding Harry from any accountability? In short, the monarchy hasn't preserved its constitutional dignity. They've sacrificed it for the so-called appearances, and in doing so, they have turned Harry into an unofficial operative for the Crown's global agenda, working under the radar in the one place free speech still threatens to slow it down, the United States. So the next time you hear that Harry has no official role, ask yourself this: do you really believe it? Or is that just what the palace wants you to think? So now this brings us to the more concerning piece, which is the line of succession. We're told by law, by tradition, and by the glossy palace press office that Prince Harry remains fifth in the line to the British throne. On the surface, this sounds ceremonial, innocuous, meaningless. After all, he stepped back, right? He moved to California, he cut a deal with Netflix, traded Buckingham Palace for boardrooms in Silicon Valley. But if we look at this, it's just a PR version of events. The truth, as always with monarchy, lies beneath the surface. You see, being in the line of succession is not optional. It's not something you choose. It's not revoked when you leave royal duties or lose your HRH. Harry remains in line because that's the default. Unless he's disqualified by law, which hasn't happened, he stays put. It's like being on a list no one can take you off of unless Parliament makes it law. And let's be brutally clear here. Parliament could remove him. They could pass a bill tomorrow, say he's not domiciled in the UK and therefore not qualified for regency or counselor of state status. But they haven't. So ask yourself this question: why? Because keeping him in the line, even symbolically, serves a purpose. It's the illusion of continuity, of royal unity. It keeps things looking stable to the Commonwealth, to the British public, to diplomats around the world. Remove him, and you spark a public reckoning. You risk headlines that say, King Charles punishes son, or family rift deepens. Yes, I know that we've seen those headlines before, but those headlines were coming as a result of Harry and Meghan's actions, not the actions of the royal family. It's a lot different when you flip this around. If the royal family takes the smallest action, the reactions are massive and can't be controlled. You see, whenever we see reactions from things that Harry and Meghan do, a lot of the times it's controlled outrage. It's controlled articles. But while Harry is posing as this outsider, I believe he may very well be a part of this shadow game in soft diplomacy. Let me go ahead and paint you this scenario. Prince Harry, the one who said, I want to step back for my mental health and go live a private life, shows up in the United States and starts advocating for online safety, digital regulation, and combating misinformation. But look closer and you see him funding groups aligned with global censorship initiatives, the ones that seek to control online speech in alignment, again, with these various dark forces that have been collapsing Western society. He's not just doing charity, he's influencing policy from the inside, while pretending he's on the so-called outside. Could this be plausible deniability? The Crown can say, oh, he's doing that on his own, or the puppets that are doing the talking for the royal family saying, oh, King Charles and Harry have no connection because he can't be trusted. Anything that is said will end up being leaked into the media. Harry is a bona fide traitor to king and country. And yet, he's still in the line of succession, still a counselor of state, still protected under opaque layers of diplomatic soft power. Now ask yourself, why keep someone in the line to the throne, someone who publicly refused to pledge loyalty to the king, unless you want to keep them on a leash? Not out of duty, but out of strategic potential, as a backup, a diplomatic proxy, a face of reform when you don't want the king tainted by politics. Let me go ahead and give you another scenario, and you tell me if this makes any kind of sense. Early on, there had been rumors flying around that Meghan was overheard say, well, we're only one plane crash away from the throne. Play the scenario out. God forbid something happened to both King Charles and Prince William, to where Prince George, still a minor, ascended the throne. Harry, unless removed, could theoretically become regent. Imagine that. The man who walked away, returning not by choice, but by law, because it goes in the line of succession, and he would be the next person over 21 who would ascend the throne. So he would take Prince George under his wing, oversee him. Yeah, you get the picture. Now here is the million-dollar question I pose to everyone. Why would Prince William, in his right mind, risk this happening if we are to believe all the malicious actions Harry and Meghan have taken against the family? Make that make sense. If you know that this is a possibility that could happen, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The most precious things in your life are going to be left in the hands of two people who deliberately tried to destroy you. Would you take that risk? I think it would be pretty naive to think that Prince William can't do anything until he becomes king. Prince William right now is the most popular royal. Literally, the most popular royal. Him and Catherine, running the show and keeping this institution alive. You think that he doesn't have any kind of power with his father to say, you know what, I really need to protect my family, and Harry is a traitor. His wife did X, Y, and Z, and we have all these threats coming out of Casa de Montecito. I don't think I feel very comfortable with Harry being stuck there in case something happens to me. And all of a sudden, by default, these two are now around my wife and children. I think he has enough pull to say, get Harry out of the line of succession and remove him, or have Parliament go ahead and take this action and just outright remove any type of power that he could possibly have for his child, Prince George, or Princess Charlotte, or Louis. I mean, they could easily do this with an act of Parliament. If we are supposed to believe everything we're being force-fed, Harry is not domiciled in the UK. At bare minimum, that disqualifies him, and the royal family should be following the law. He should be removed, at least bare minimum, from Counselor of State, but they didn't. They could have when they went ahead and added Anne and Edward. At the same time, they could have taken out Prince Harry and Andrew, but they didn't. So why are they jerking us all around? I think that's the next question. And I think the answer is because the monarchy is not just about tradition. In fact, they're moving quite far away from tradition. If they really cared about tradition, then there wouldn't be two invisible children in the line of succession. They would have followed the protocol to validate those children came from the body of Meghan Markle and have a legitimate place in the line of succession. But they haven't done that. This attitude of never explain, never complain is really about not having anybody to answer to. And the reason why? It's about control. It's about preserving the crown's influence through bloodlines, through ambiguity, and through silence. The palace tells you what it wants you to know. The rest? That's all buried beneath the smiles, the handshakes, and all that plausible deniability without having to get their hands dirty. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you with this final question. Why did the crown specifically leave Prince Harry's name Counselor of State if he's not domiciled in the UK anymore? That is one of the rules in the Regency Act. So why didn't Parliament at the same time, when they were adding Princess Anne and Prince Edward, to remove Harry since he no longer qualified? Well, I have a couple of theories. The first theory I have is the king simply didn't want it. It was going to overcomplicate things and cause too much headache for him, especially if there always was an intention to bring Harry back after this mission collapsed, which I do believe is the reason why nothing has been done to remove Harry or Meghan from that website. But I believe that that was all again for the optics, to appear as if they have distanced themselves. There's also the real possibility that Harry has a place in the UK and nobody knows about it. So now, if Charles went ahead and removed Harry as Counselor of State, theoretically, he would have had to have done it as well for the line of succession, because you have to be domiciled in the UK in order to take on any type of constitutional role. If Harry was legitimately a threat to the institution, Parliament would have removed him, and they would have used the legal excuse that he was not domiciled in the UK. That's law. So I think that they left it as such. It would have been a PR nightmare. If there is intention to bring Harry back, it would have caused a mess. But also, you see, being in the line of succession isn't just symbolic. It's a direct tether to the head of state of the United Kingdom. And whether or not the palace admits it, that tether carries enormous global weight. Take foreign travel, for example. Officially, only King Charles is the UK's head of state, but in practice, members of the immediate line of succession are often treated as if they are heads of state. The Prince of Wales, Princess Anne, and yes, even Prince Harry are extended courtesies and protections far beyond what ordinary private people get. Why? Because an attack on a senior royal isn't just a personal tragedy. It's a geopolitical crisis. We all know that in the United States, we don't want that kind of drama on our hands if Harry decides to go fake another car chase. Legally, the Vienna Convention only covers accredited diplomats, but the UK Foreign Office usually makes sure top royals' trips are arranged in such a way that they do get diplomatic protections. And when you think about Prince Harry, look at how he ended up in Angola and Ukraine and Nigeria and Colombia. Some of the most dangerous places, and they want us to believe that Harry is just this private citizen and using his own celebrity bodyguards. And in the United States, while the press repeats Harry is just a private figure now, U.S. law tells us another tale. Under federal law 18 U.S.C. 1116, royals high in succession are classified as internationally protected persons. Now, what does that mean for Meghan Markle? Well, she's not protected because theoretically she's not blood royal in the line of succession. So I truly do believe that the whole fight that Harry was doing with the Home Office was to get not only those invisible children protection, but also for Meghan. This puts Harry in the same category, and I hate to say this, as presidents and prime ministers. The Secret Service and State Department treat Harry as distinguished foreign visitors, giving them head of state style protection to some degree. Now, when we're talking globally, under the UN Convention on the Protection of Internationally Protected Persons, the UK designates heirs and senior royals, not senior working royals, senior royals as IPPs when they travel. And yes, Harry would be considered a senior royal since he's fifth in line to the throne. And again, also listed as Counselor of State. There's a reason why Charles didn't remove him simultaneously when they added Anne and Edward. In any case, this ensures international consequences if, let's say, Harry gets harmed. So in practice, it means Harry is traveling the world with a safety net most elected leaders don't even get to enjoy. So let's now ask this uncomfortable question. If Harry is supposedly irrelevant and retired, why does the entire international system still treat him like a head of state in all but name? And here's where it all ties back to King Charles's bigger agenda. Because Harry's work in the U.S. through Archewell Fugazi Public Charity and endless advocacy campaigns just happens to align perfectly with the World Economic Forum and UN Agenda 2030 goals. So let's not pretend this is coincidence. Charles keeps Harry technically listed as a counselor of state while quietly neutering his official duties. At the same time, Harry operates abroad under the cover of celebrity, pushing the same globalist policies Charles champions with the legal and diplomatic protections of some far more powerful than a private citizen, okay? That's not preserving the Constitution. That's bending it for optics while playing a dangerous double game, in my opinion. So the media outlets, as well as the spin doctors, probably approved by the palace, keep telling the public that Harry is just another California dad. Ask yourself this question. Does an ordinary dad get global protection and access to the corridors of global policy power? Or does that sound more like a royal pawn being used to soften resistance to an agenda ordinary citizens never voted for? I wouldn't be so quick to brush it off. Next time you hear that Harry is irrelevant, remember this. Irrelevance doesn't come with U.S. protection, Vienna Convention coverage, and a global platform to undermine free speech in the name of safety. That isn't irrelevance. You know what that is? That's covert influence, carefully disguised as powerlessness. So let me leave you with this thought. I'm pretty sure many of you are coming up with every excuse under the sun as to why Harry is still left on the website as counselor of state and in the line of succession, as well as those 2 phantom children. Bottom line is, all that you have seen Harry and Meghan do you really think Prince William would allow the possibility, if God forbid something happened to him, for his children and wife to be surrounded by these 2 lunatics? I mean, seriously ask yourself this question. Do you think William would risk that? Now, after everything that we have seen turn out to be a lie, it's getting really hard to defend the institution for not having a hand in this. And I do believe that what we are seeing is paving that way back for Harry to go home. Now, the final thought that I'll leave you here with is I think about the times Harry had talked about this so-called mission that he's been on, and retelling the story about how he told his father that he wanted to change the media landscape. Essentially, the online world is what we're starting to understand this to be. And then Harry stating that his father told him that this was going to be a suicide mission. Now, at the time, when you heard him say that, it almost sounded like his father was telling him that if you do this, it's over. Like, you're going to get slaughtered for trying to do away with free speech. But could it be King Charles telling his son that, look, if you do take on this mission, you do realize this is going to be a suicide mission. You're going to lose all your credibility. You're going to lose your popularity. You're going to lose, in the public's eyes, favor as well as favor with the family, because we have to make it look like you really messed up and lost everything. Just some food for thought. Maybe Harry knew that all of this was going to happen and this is how it was supposed to turn out. He already knew that he was going to become the most unpopular, the most hated, in order to be able to sell this to the world. Anything's possible at this point, especially what we've all been through. But I would love to know what you guys think about this because, there is a reason for why Harry was not removed. And I don't think it has anything to do with Charles feeling, well, he's my son and I love him and blah, blah, blah. No. I think this had something to do strategically with everything that's going on, and that's just my opinion, but I'd love to know yours. So definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.